St. Andrews in the counseling department. Um, I will just pull up we're gonna have a slideshow just to kind of keep us on track and keep us moving forward. Um, Ideally, we would love to kind of work through a lot of just some information that we've prepared for y'all and then save questions for the end just to manage muting and unmuting and the pleasantries that come with Zoom. I definitely have flashbacks to the pandemic, being back on a Zoom platform, but I just feel like for simplicity, we can try to do that. Of course, if you have a burning question, definitely feel free to put something in the chat or let us know and we can address it on the fly, of course. So without further ado, let's talk about mental health at St. Andrews. So today what we'll be talking about is um, some time for you to meet the St. Andrews counselors. One of our counselors, Chaz Brackeen, has been held up. She is hopefully going to be jumping on soon, but myself and Melissa Kniff are here. And then we'll get some time to talk about our counseling services, our wellness course, and what the wellness programming is that we offer at St. Andrews. And then we'll dive a little bit more into kind of like what we're seeing. I think it's helpful to kind of get grounded in the larger landscape of adolescence as a whole, like more across the country. And then we'll talk about St. Andrews specifically. And then we can end with some parent resources. So that's where we'll go. All right. All right. Okay, so I would love to just open up. My name is Lizzie Brown. I'm the director of counseling at St. Andrews. I am starting my 4th year at St. Andrews. I graduated actually as an alum back in 2008, so quite a while ago, but it's lovely being back at St. Andrews. I have my licensed professional counselors and mental health certification through the state of Delaware. And I originally got into mental health, I guess, more than a decade ago. I was studying it at the master's level when I was down in Austin, Texas. I lived down in Austin for almost a decade with my husband and 2 dogs. And when we saw this position come up at St. Andrews, it felt just too good to be true to get to move back home, move back to the East Coast. Both my husband and I are from this side of the U.S., and so it was good to come back to Knox and Town Pond. Prior to entering mental health, I was in the yoga and wellness industry. So I worked in yoga studios for about a decade prior to joining St. Andrews. So I will pass the mic over to Melissa. Melissa, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Kniff. I'm a licensed associate clinical mental health counselor in the state of Delaware and a national certified counselor through the National Board of Certified Counselors. This is my 2nd year at St. Andrews. I come here by way of working with children my entire life. I started as an elementary school teacher many years ago. And then throughout my more recent years, I was a tutor and mentor for probably the last 20, maybe 15 to 20 years. My husband is an associate dean of admissions here at St. Andrews. So he was hired last year. And when I came down to visit him, I just thought if I were ever lucky enough to work here, it would be a dream come true. I have a couple favorite traditions at St. Andrews. One are the all-school meetings that occur on Thursdays. For some reason, I just get so fired up for the school meetings. I love how the entire school community comes together. They talk about topics of interest, or the kids will promote their activities or groups, and everybody cheers for each other. So I love that that happens every week. And it also occurs directly in the auditorium directly across from our counseling offices. So I always run over and make sure I'm present for those. I have a second favorite tradition, which is Wednesday night chapel. It feels very special to me that the entire school gathers together in the chapel midweek and kids participate in a service that's largely organized by students or by specific affinity groups. So those are just two of my favorite things at St. Andrews.
Great. And then, Chaz, I was curious if you are able to share a little bit about joining our team.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Chaz Brackeen. I'm a licensed master's level social worker at St. Andrews. I am brand new to the team, so thank you. I'm really enjoying my time at St. Andrews School. I really enjoy teaching the health and wellness course. I also really enjoy working with the students at St. Andrews School. I also enjoy our school meetings. I feel like the school meetings, it's a great time for when all the students, the whole student body comes together at large. And I just really enjoy that time and that space to be able to just see all the announcement and all the wonderful things that students are doing on campus. I have been working in the field of mental health for over 15 years. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in social work. I have also taught at the I'm originally from the state of Connecticut. I am brand new to Delaware. I have taught at the University of New Haven in the state of Connecticut as a professor in residence at the University of New Haven. I've taught many courses in the field of psychology. I've taught adolescent development psychology. I've taught forensic psychology, health psychology, abnormal psychology, child development, and a host of many other courses I've taught. So I have been working in the field for a very long time. I also have been a therapist as well, working with adolescents, children's, adults, families. Um, a little bit more about myself. I've also worked for the state of Connecticut Department of Children and Families as a child abuse social worker, and I've also worked in the past for the state of Connecticut Department of Social Services as a social worker, assisting families with applying for social service benefits as well. So I'm glad to be at St. Andrews. Oh, prior to working at St. Andrews, I also worked at Nemours Children's Hospital in the emergency department as a social worker in the ED at Nemours. So thank you for welcoming me tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, as y'all can hear, we kind of all come together. What I love about having this team is that we really bring a lot of different background, experience, practices, even personality. And so that's something that we'll talk a little bit more. But one of the things that we know about effectiveness of mental health and counseling is rapport, is being able to build relationships. And so we really do try to pull on our different experiences to build strong relationships with the students who we get to work with, and even in the wellness setting, which is something that we will get to speak about in just a moment. So before we talk about the wellness course and some of our wellness programming, I figured that we should probably just kick it off talking about what our counseling services are. The most obvious is definitely going to be that we offer obviously individual counseling sessions to students. These are free of charge. It's part of the St. Andrews experience. I mean, just as your child, if they go to the health center, you're not receiving a bill. Same if they were to come in for a session or a meeting, check-in. It's just part of the St. Andrews experience. And we meet with kids for a lot of different reasons. They may come in once and talk with us about a roommate challenge, and we might never see them again. And sometimes we'll have a meeting with them once their freshman year about a roommate challenge, and then we don't see them until senior year. And then all of a sudden, they're coming back, knocking at the door, saying, "Hey, I think I met with you, and I'd love to discuss something around helping a ninth grader around their freshman roommate dynamics or something like that." So it's really student led in terms of the frequency. Of course, if there's something that we feel like would be beneficial for the student to meet on a more frequent basis, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, we'll of course guide that conversation. given that we are the professionals and we're the experts in the room. But we do really find that St. Andrews students are pretty intuitive and self-reflective in terms of the kind of support they need. The common areas that we support, I would say that I tried to put this in order and then I kept reorganizing it, to be honest, because I feel like it fluctuates depending on the time of year. Our two most common topics that we discuss with students are going to be around stress and anxiety management. And then if you jump to the third bulletin, relationship issues. I felt that it was essential to add in depression, kind of in our second bullet, just because it pairs nicely with kind of discussing anxiety and anxiety management. We do not diagnose, even though we are all licensed providers and are capable of diagnosing. If we ever feel that a student's care is elevated to the need of needing a diagnosis, needing more of a full-fledged treatment team or multiple providers, that's something that we will typically work on a referral, just so that the student can have ongoing care, since one of the things that we aren't able to do is offer one-on-one counseling or even individual counseling during the break from the academic calendar. So we really try to, stay in our lane of offering strong support counseling, working through some of these tougher issues, again, grief, loss, lower mood or depression, relationship issues, and that can be romantic, it can be platonic, it can be, I'm sure many of you have heard this, the friend group issue. Which friend group am I in? Roommates, teachers, how do I ask for an extension or how do I advocate for myself? So it's all those relationship concerns for adolescents. And then self-esteem and identity exploration are two interesting ones. And we get to kind of see them in different veins as the student progresses, usually through their time at St. Andrews. I do want to hit on some of the other services that we provide. There's always a counselor on call 24/7. I am actually on call and I have my phone with me right here in case there were a crisis. When your students are on campus, if there are students on campus, we are providing 24/7 coverage if there is a crisis. So while we don't provide 11 p.m. casual therapy sessions, because we would hopefully advocate that they be asleep. We do, of course, if any circumstance comes up, the adults on campus and particularly the health center and security and the dean's office do know who is on call, how to contact us, and we can provide that support. The other two areas that I feel like are underutilized, and I'm careful saying that, but the referral resource. One of the things that I think we've done a really good job is starting to build relationships with providers in the state of Delaware and in surrounding areas, so that if for any reason your student either heavens forbid doesn't connect with one of us, or they're looking for someone who really specializes in this one particular therapy, or they want to meet Sundays at 2 p.m. For whatever reason, we're not able to meet their needs, that we have providers who we can work with them to find a fit for. And this can look like mental health providers. We have an entire list of local prescribers. So people who, if they are on medication management, we can work with them, and then also some nutritionists. So this can be a really powerful tool for students and managing their mental well-being. The last thing I'll say is consultation with a student's current provider. So this would be if a student is meeting with someone and the provider is like, why do they keep referencing this free period? What does that mean? Why is it rotating? Sometimes we can serve as a liaison to explain, all right, this is how the rotating class schedule looks like. This is why they keep missing their appointment, because they don't realize that G block is first on this day and then it's third on this day. And so we can kind of serve as an interpreter, if you will, to the St. Andrews day for students. So I'll pause there. I want to see if Chaz or Melissa, if you have anything else that you wanted to hit on this.
I think you covered everything. I would add that sometimes with new students, there may be some adjustment issues that come along with just starting at a new school. And sometimes kids will come in for brief therapy, which is, maybe just a couple of sessions to just kind of adjust to how boarding school works, and maybe there's some homesickness or just trying to figure out the schedule and the routine. So I just thought maybe that was another area that should be mentioned.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, the one other service that I actually realized that we don't really have on here, it doesn't primarily live, quote unquote, under the counseling department, is we do work to support several student-run support groups. So if a student is interested in providing a support group where they can gather with other students who are experiencing similar dynamics, whether that might be grief and loss, that they oftentimes will reach out to the counseling team and either ask for support in guiding that conversation. They will reach out to maybe a faculty member to help support that conversation. But then it can be a time where students gather with one another, and it can be a really wonderful time for them to just be with other students who have experienced or are experiencing similar challenges. So it's not necessarily something that is housed under our department, but is something that we are available to support. We've been really lucky to have it be student-led, and for it to be really enjoyed by the students. So, all right. Let's go to this next discussion. I want to just dive into the wellness course and program. So one of the other offerings that we support at St. Andrews is the wellness course. For those of you who have a fourth former or recently a fourth former, perhaps you've had a parent-teacher conference for us, especially if your kiddo was in health class during the fall semester, and you've probably heard a very similar spiel. But for those of you who haven't, I always love to talk about this course. It's something that we all have a lot of fun getting to lead, and I think the students consistently report back that it's a really enjoyable space for them. Some just high level points. The course itself is a graduation requirement. So every student who goes through St. Andrews, except for someone who would be a new junior, will have taken this class. We have made it so that it's actually structured as a pass-fail class. And that really allows for a few different things. The first is that it allows us to have no outside homework. So we're really not doing any grading. Everything that we expect from the students happens during the wellness period, so that they have the time outside of wellness class to work on other assignments or be social or focus on athletics or the arts. One of the big things that we talk about right off the bat in this class is how do you balance all the things that you want to do at St. Andrews with the time that you have. And so it's very intentional that this class specifically, in support of that conversation, everything we're doing is during the 75-minute block. And then it is hopefully in support of setting up all the other initiatives that students are working on, like their academics, their arts, their athletics, being an adolescent. The class style itself is very discussion based. Again, for those of you who have had a student or have a student in this class, they will definitely tell you that it's very casual. It's kind of like gathering around a dinner table and just discussing whatever the topic of the day is. We bring resources and, research studies or statistics or articles or information to support the discussion, but that we really try to make it one where the students are guiding it. And then we are also giving them accurate information and also correcting sometimes information that they bring about certain topics. The topics we primarily go over are really the ones that we've either heard from students they want more information on in regard to their health and wellness. topics that we know adolescents need just in their own well-being, and then also best practices in terms of what are other schools doing, what are their programs doing, what are our recent alumni saying this was really helpful, and I've heard that this is best practice at the college level. So we're really trying to make sure that we're hitting all those areas. And it'll be things like emotions and our executive functioning, time management. It'll be areas like drugs, alcohol, substance, and the addiction cycle. Right now, we just entered into the unit of relationships and social dynamics. So we're talking a lot about all the ways that we interact with one another. And we also do a part on the wellness cycle, or excuse me, the stress cycle. And so we get to talk about stress and how to manage stress and the difference between stressors versus stress. It's usually an interesting eye opener for the kiddos at that point. And then we have a few different elective class periods where we'll talk about sleep and we'll talk about nutrition. And of course, everyone's favorite topic is sex education. So that's where we end the end the semester. Hopefully the students will have enough rapport by that point to indulge us in some really meaningful conversation. So I'll pause there. I'd love for Melissa and Chaz to get to share some of their experience of teaching the wellness course and things that they've found to be really beneficial with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love teaching the wellness course. I think that initially, when the kids come in and start the course, they're not quite sure what to make of a pass-fail course. And I think that they develop a mindset that it's a privilege to be a part of the course. It's really like one of the rare opportunities they have to not have work outside of the classroom. There are no homework assignments, tests, or quizzes. Everything's done within the classroom. There's a lot of partnered work. There's a lot of small group work. They do a lot of presentations in the class. And I did want to add one thing that we really spend a lot of time on when the course initiates is building trust and rapport. So we do a lot of kind of team building conversations. I know for myself this year, I really wanted to focus on that kind of feeling where we all respected and trusted each other, our lived experiences, and what we were bringing into this class. Understanding that each speaker is to be respected for the perspectives that they're offering. And so, yeah, sometimes we do class outside. I've taken the kids to the tea dock for a class. If the weather's nice, we've gone on walks outside and really use the property. And I would say that like every class is focused somehow. We're reminding them that this is a wellness class in all sense of the word. So even if it's just, practicing a moment of mindfulness before or at the end of a class is just another way to reinforce this concept and this idea that this is a wellness course throughout.
Right, right. Hi, I also love teaching the wellness course as well. The students are very, very engaged in my class. I feel like it's a very conversational course. A lot of times students will come in and just talk about like how their other courses are going, and they'll come in and they'll vent and talk about what's going on in other classes. And I feel like it's a great way to just have all the students come in together at once to kind of just share what life is like in other courses and just come to like vent and just talk about just kind of just being able to just express themselves and then being just a supportive environment. I feel like my class is, like I said, very conversational, and I feel like I teach it in a structured way for where I show YouTube clips on certain topics that we discuss for the day. I've also brought students out as well into the area outside where they can have class outside. They said they actually enjoyed doing that when the weather was a lot warmer. So they really had a nice time being just in nature and being in an environment where they could kind of like ground themselves. Um, let's see what else. And then that's pretty much it. Like the students, they kind of just really I'm just glad that I have a group of students that are just able to just be able to like share their experiences that they have in other classes and then bring it into the classroom. I also, another thing I wanted to share is that I also share TED Talks on different topics that we're also discussing in class, and they feel like that's been very helpful to be able to see different like TED Talks on different topics that we're discussing for the unit.
Great. Thank you both. So yeah, clearly we all love teaching the wellness course. It's a really fun course, and we're really grateful for the opportunity to get to spend it with all of your students. So there are a few programs that we work either in support of or we work to actually lead that are outside of the academic program. So we through the counseling or wellness department, we lead conversations with Learning Courage. Learning Courage is a nonprofit organization that travels around the world, but works primarily in the U.S. With independent schools and boarding schools to talk about communication, boundaries, and consent. So one of the things that we're actually hosting Learning Courage this weekend, this Saturday. This ninth and 10th graders will be up first for a 75-minute workshop, and then the juniors and seniors will be up second for a 75-minute workshop. And we get to really dig into really important conversation and, again, facts and information around how to set boundaries, what are boundaries. Um, it's not just saying this is okay and that's not okay. It's a little more granular than that, getting them to understand some of the pitfalls to why we either don't set boundaries or we aren't able to uphold our boundaries, and hopefully giving them some tools, some stems to take that information and either continue it at St. Andrews, or if they're a senior, to take it off into the world outside of Knoxontown Pond, which is, not always as supportive and kind of gracious an environment. We also talk about consent, and that can be in all different ways. So whether that is technological consent, when is it appropriate to take a picture and post it? All the way to more romantic relationships. So having some of those really important conversations. And again, giving them facts. What is consent from a fact base versus maybe what they see on TikTok. We also help to guide a conversation with a different nonprofit called Generation SOS. Generation SOS has a mission of really destigmatizing conversation and group discussion around substance abuse. So its model is to bring in mostly young adults to discuss in a school-based setting a person's specific story, and then answering really any questions, talking about some really important messaging around substance abuse, some of the triggers, some of the um, risk factors around substance abuse. Last year, we hosted Generation SOS for the second time. So this coming year will be our third time. In the last 2 years, we've had a boarding school graduate. So the first year was a St. Andrews graduate, which was really wonderful to have her back on campus after about a decade. And then last year was a different boarding school, but another boarding school graduate. And he was able to share his story, his experience, and, so much of what he shared, students kind of resonated with, like, oh, I too also worry about the college process. And he did a really good job of saying it's not the college process that led to overindulging, but it was these kind of like these risk factors that he didn't really even understand to be aware of. And so he offers kind of his narrative. He talks about some of the risk factors and then offers up a space for this questions and answers for the students to just kind of understand what their relationship may be, or maybe in the future with substances. We know that not talking about it does not lead to usually good results. And so we're just trying different ways of getting students more comfortable with discussing these really tough questions. We also work in support of other departments on campus. So whether in day, Pond Day, the chapel program, will work with different faculty and staff members to support their programming. If they want us to offer help with Pond Day and outdoor meditation, we're happy to, work with some of the faculty on a script or chapel program. We have several students who want to lead a Wednesday evening chapel about the importance of mental health awareness. And so they will coordinate the entire chapel, but of course, working with our support. So it's really fun for us to get to kind of work in a cross-departmental capacity to see how mental health can be in support of a lot of the kind of already core programs of St. Andrews. Something we always talk about. We are not necessarily a core part of the program, but mental health is essential to being able to do the core programming. And so that's something that we work to support whenever we can. So I wanted to take a little bit of time also to discuss a little bit about what we're seeing with adolescents at large, and then more specifically at St. Andrews. So I would imagine that on the left-hand side of your screen, where it says teens at large, um, that a lot of these points are probably not news to you. We have seen over the course of the last decade, many believe that it started at the pandemic. It actually, in tracking some of this data, it began prior to the pandemic, a lower baseline in regard to adolescent mental health. We've seen absolutely an increased level of sadness, hopelessness, and even suicidality. And that statistic is disproportionately affecting teenage girls and those in the LGBTQ plus community. We're noticing as well these differences in how either female identifying students and male identifying students are performing in the classroom. And when we're saying performing, that can look like perhaps grades. It can also look like behavior. It can also look like engagement with the material. Like students can achieve very highly just because of their intellect or their intellect, but they may not be that engaged with the material. And so they can just regurgitate a fact, get a good grade, but have they actually engaged with and learned the material? So we're, these are things that research is really working to understand how these differences, which have always existed, are impacting adolescents presently. We're also seeing, of course, that teenagers are managing multiple pressures at an increasing rate. So the pressures that, we always say, okay, well, back in my day, I had to deal with this. We're finding that they're having to navigate different kinds of pressures. And social media is, of course, one of those big pressure points. And the last thing, one of the last things that I thought would be helpful to just bring everyone's attention to is just misinformation on mental health. We're seeing this at large, that there is this kind of over familiarity with this understanding of mental health, thinking that they've seen something on TikTok and so they think they understand what major depressive disorder is, and they will self-diagnose. Again, so adolescents are finding themselves kind of like overly comfortable almost with mental health in a way that is actually really inaccurate, and which can lead to either a delay of treatment or incorrect treatment, and delay of care or incorrect care. So what does this mean for like St. Andrews? What does this mean for your kids at St. Andrews? I would say that St. Andrews specifically is actually, in general, our mental health is actually doing rather well. We have, I work hard to stay in contact with other schools and discussing kind of some of the challenges that they're facing with their student body. And I would say that in terms of what we're seeing at St. Andrews, we definitely see a lot of interest from students to want to understand their relationships better. That is probably the primary driver, and one of the primary drivers of possible anxiety and stress that we secondarily see. And so when we're working with students at St. Andrews, one of the things that we as a department did well, at least when I took over as the director of counseling, was to gather data. I wanted to see actually what are we seeing with students, and trying to categorize what was the initial reason that students were reaching out to counseling. It has gotten, because we do it by hand, it's rather hard to track each and every session, and to say like what is the data for each and every session. So we felt that it was most helpful to say what is getting the student to reach out to us. So we track the initial reason for contact at St. Andrews Counseling, and the number one reason, not to harp on it, but to harp on it, is that they want help with interpersonal dynamics, and they want help with their roommate. They want help with a friend. They want help with a romantic partner. They want help with having a conversation with a teacher. It's a lot around communication, around boundaries, and around making like value-based decisions. So that's by far our number one reason for counseling. And then the next layer would definitely be help with managing their stress and anxiety. So anxiety management might look like actually working with specific strategies, but it also will look like understanding what is stemming anxiety. We know that anxiety can be both a kind of a genetic predisposition, and it can also be environmental. And so working to manage the areas that we have control, and then identifying the areas we don't have control, and then understanding ways that we can cope with the parts of our anxiety we don't have control on. And then the stress management is really essential as well, because as I kind of give a little tidbit before, we talk a little bit about the difference between stressors and stress. So the stressors may be the robust schedule at St. Andrews. You need to get out of bed and be at breakfast check-in by 8 a.m. and you are going all day long until lights out at 10:30. So that might be the stressor, but then how does your body, how does your nervous system, how does your mind actually respond in the form of stress? Some people respond in a really motivated and positive and helpful way, and that gets them going. Great. Others are responding with maybe a disproportionate engagement to their nervous system. And so we're seeing heightened levels of stress or disengagement, so kind of a shutdown. And so getting students to understand, oh, that's your body just saying you need to slow down, or that's your mind saying I'm overloaded, or I don't understand, or I am overwhelmed. And so trying to help them decode what they're experiencing, and then from there empowering them. And of course, this happens over time, empowering them to be able to manage that, so that, the goal is that we aren't needed, and that they are doing this work on their own. They're doing it with their teachers, their advisor, with their parents, with their family, but that we can be a space where they can kind of debrief some of that and learn some of this. The last two pieces I'd say are around executive functioning support. While we do have a fantastic learning specialist, Karen Pupke, we also will work a lot of times in support of students, whether they have a learning plan or not, they can come and meet with us. They don't need to have a learning plan to meet with us. But for some students who do have a learning plan, or even don't, they will come to us and say, these are the challenges I'm facing. It's really presenting an executive functioning basis, whether it's procrastination, time management, time blocking, things like that. And so we can work with the students to make plans, to pull out your planner. Let's chunk up the day. So sometimes we can get really hands-on in that way, and that can be really useful. And then the last thing I'll say is kind of the emotional exploration and regulation support. And so I actually wanted Melissa, if you had a moment, if you wouldn't mind kind of touching on this, because I loved kind of your explanation of it.
Oh, gosh.
I know. Put you on the spot.
I just suddenly felt very much on the spot.
Perfect.
I'm just trying to think of, honestly, when you say that, the different ways and the different approaches we use with the kids. So, Obviously, kids come in with different lived experience. We are working with 314 kids, not that they all come to us, but if we kind of plucked out what the different needs are of the kids, yes, I think like relationship support and anxiety and stress management are the kind of the foundational reasons they're coming. But with that, everybody has an individual, unique set of skills, as they say in the movie Taken. Different experiences, different family structures, changing family structures. There is possibly grief and loss. There can be generational trauma. And for kiddos who are maybe exploring counseling for the first time, it is this unique, beautiful experience because sometimes a kiddo just shows up at our door and there's trepidation and they're wondering, how do I do this? And is it okay if I come in? And can I make an appointment? And we do, by the way, take the kids through. We have many meetings a year where we show them the proper avenues to reach out to counseling. But when a kiddo shows up at the door, when they first sit down, it's just a unique, beautiful experience because on a lot of levels, we're meeting for the first time, even if we've seen this person floating around the school and performing on stage. And when they come into counseling for the first time and they sit down, we spend time building trust and rapport with this person, and that may take several sessions. And there are just little bits coming out in unique ways. It could be through talk, it could be humor, it could be play, it could be the bowl of fidgets in front of them. So I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm exactly answering your question, but we're skilled in a variety of different therapeutic modalities. And it depends on, really who the person is sitting across from us, and that kind of guides the way we tap into working with them. So there's not just one distinct way to work with a student.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to bring part of that conversation. Y'all are getting to hear some of our departmental debriefs, and when we were talking about that earlier in the semester, I thought that would be helpful for our parents to hear. So we've gathered a couple of resources. I'm realizing that perhaps having it on a slideshow is not the most useful. And so I'm happy to share with our virtual events coordinator a list of these resources with also like hyperlinks in them that can be sent out to everyone who's registered, because I realize that having these resources kind of on the screen, I mean, unless you do a
Take a
screenshot,
screenshot.
it's not so helpful though. But we gathered some books, we gathered some podcasts, and then we also gathered our contact information, which we can make sure that gets sent to all of y'all after this meeting. But I'm gonna pause here, and I thought that we could end the session. We have about 10 minutes, and I thought that if there are any questions, there was a lot of material, there was opinions, there was, statistics, there was a lot going on. So I just wanted to see kind of where this group is needing to go, and just understanding a little bit more around mental health at St. Andrews.